Hi, and thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to our Learn with Google webinar. This one's about the full value of mobile, and we're so excited to have you here today. My name's Julia Donnan. I'm a new product specialist at Google working on mobile. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items and give you a quick tour of your console. On the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box. Please feel free to chat in your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can at the end of the session. You can also use this box if you're having any technical issues, and our technical support will get you back on track. So before we start, what do I mean by the full value of mobile? Well, it can largely be understood to mean all the ways smartphones drive consumer behaviour and are ultimately valued for marketers and businesses, and the attribution challenges that come along with that. So for example, I've just moved house and the dishwasher in the house doesn't actually work, which means unfortunately I'm in the market for a new one. In my research process, I spent considerable time across screens deciding what model to purchase. And much of my research was actually on a mobile device. I was watching TV at home and was researching and consulting with my partner about which model to buy using my Nexus 4. We decided on a particular make and model, however, both of us was keen to touch and feel the dishwasher in store before purchase. So we went into store last weekend and we bought the dishwasher. Now, the current attribution model for my purchase would ultimately place the biggest importance on my in-store experience. However, I'd already made up my mind by then it was actually the mobile device that was the key influencer for me in this process. So Google's done lots of research and developed tools around how to help businesses understand this very problem, which I'm excited to share you with today. Our webinar will cover 5 main areas. Firstly, let's take a moment to step back and understand what's happening in today's multi-screen connected world. Then we're going to look at how mobiles are affecting your business, using an example from an advertiser we've worked closely with. Next, I'm going to introduce a new tool that we've designed to help you assign the value to all mobile conversions that matter to you. We'll wrap up by summarising our key takeaways and then move on to some Q&A. So first, let's understand how consumers are behaving in this new multi-screen world. So let's take a step back and actually touch on some of the behaviour we've been seeing at Google that have led us to the need to discuss this topic today. We live in a world of abundant computing with multiple operating systems and increasing number of devices. And it's a really different environment from when Google first started. There was essentially one operating system and one device category, the PC. But today, 65% of online Australians have a smartphone and 35% have a tablet, all using various hardware and software. In fact, 88% of all of our media interactions are now screen-based, with traditional media taking up less and less of consumers' share of mind. We've seen that in this multi-device world, people are moving seamlessly between their devices, whether at home, in the office, or on the go. 81% of Australians use sequential screens to achieve a single task, and most actually do so within a day. However, despite all of these big facts, it's really important to remember that people are actually the same as they ever were. We still have things we want to learn, that we want to find, that we want to do. But technology now allows us to do this whenever and wherever we want. And these kind of changes don't actually happen that often, once a decade, maybe even less. But it's important to note that the shift from laptops to mobiles, from one screen to multiple screens, actually creates tremendous opportunities for business today. So with all these devices and all of these screens and thinking about how to engage with your target market across all of them, it becomes important to understand how and actually why consumers choose each device in a particular scenario. What actually makes them pick up their smartphone instead of their tablet? And what makes them walk to use the PC in the next room instead of reaching for the smartphone that's directly in their pocket? An Australian study we did earlier this year with Ipsos showed us that this choice is largely driven by context. And by context, we mean that consumers consider a number of factors when evaluating in that split second what device they're going to reach for. And they think about things like time. How much time does the activity require? And how much time do they have to complete that activity? The goal, what kind of task is it? Is it simple or complex? Is it task-related or is it relaxed? What's their location? Are they at work? Are they on the couch? Are they on the go? And what's their attitude and state of mind when they're about to complete this task? So this proliferation of screens and the reasons consumers choose screens has also meant that many new paths to conversions have actually been created. But first, let's frame where we've come from. In the desktop world, we're all quite familiar with two major conversion paths, from PC to store and via PC alone through e-commerce. And at Google, we've done a lot of research and work to track the value of these online conversions and help you as our customers optimize them to drive ROI. However, as you move into the mobile world, the options available to consumers opens up hugely, and so therefore do the possible paths to conversion. We can see that these consumers roughly move in a few key ways. And first, let's look at the online commerce column in the right-hand side. So firstly, we really see quite often consumers purchasing something through an app or a site. But we also see people purchasing via PC, but having spent time researching or browsing across other devices, which is similar to the example I gave earlier about my dishwasher purchase. This behaviour I touched upon earlier is something that's happening really widely in Australia, but we haven't actually been tracking as an industry. But at Google, we've started to do a lot of research around it to try and help our advertisers understand the way people are doing this, and then also the value we need to attribute to it. A crucial part of this puzzle is new cross-device conversion tracking that's coming soon to AdWords. If we then move to the left-hand side of the screen, you begin to think about the impact our phones are actually having on the actions we're taking in the physical world. So, for example, clicking on a store locator to find the closest store. People are using the click-to-call experience to continue their sales dialogue on a phone with a person. And we see people moving in the other direction, extending their in-store experience via their smartphone. So after the store experience or even in the store itself, something that we call showrooming. So collectively, these are all new mobile behaviours and they're all hard to track. So the conversation today is about preparing for the mobile consumer and the actions they're taking on these devices, and preparing your business about how you need to track and attribute these, and ultimately change your business practice as a result. And we know that these mobile paths to purchase are not just happening globally, they're also happening locally. With one of the highest smartphone penetration levels in the world, we really know that mobile searches drive valuable outcome for Australian businesses. Here you see some statistics around local searches on mobile. 86% of Australians have taken action as a result of their mobile search, whether it's connecting with a business, whether it's visiting them in person, telling others about it, or actually making a purchase. So now we understand how this multi-screen connected world works a little better, we can actually start to evaluate how mobile is impacting your business today. And to do that, I want to suggest that you start with the experiences you're actually offering your consumer on your mobile experience or destination. We have a lot of conversations with people about their mobile sites, and I think a good example to illustrate what's involved in this conversation is using the M site from Sears that I've got up here, which is a US retailer. Here you can see that there are a lot of options for consumers to take and the different types of action they can take on this site. We can see at the top that someone can scan a barcode and begin an m-commerce experience. There's also an option to download the Sears app, which has the m-commerce capabilities, but also offers additional functionality of being kind of an in-store companion. We also see the call to action around store locator, and down at the bottom, you have the ability to contact via phone as you move towards your purchase decision. So what we can actually see here within the Sears site is 4 different calls to action, many of which the digital marketer has not historically thought of as part of the ROI calculation. And this in itself actually informs a new business planning, what's on the site and what we enable on call center and downloads, and it also demands a new type of attribution. In order to consider new models of attribution, I think let's first consider the traditional digital attribution process. And most advertisers do think about conversions in that digital frame, which makes sense. It's the model we've all used for a long period of time now. You think about a certain investment, say $600,000 in this example, that drives a certain number of orders through a digital site. This could also be something like downloads or sign up to something if you don't have m-commerce capabilities on your site. But in itself, this is a classical digital ROI experience. And from the number of orders you get, you can really start to understand what your actual ROI was from your advertising. But then we think about this attribution model, keeping in mind the end site we looked at from Sears. They actually felt it was important enough to have calls to action like find a store and download an app right on their landing page. So if this is important enough to be front and center on their landing page and it's a valuable action for their consumers to take, why aren't we attributing any value to it? So as you redo the value equation to add in the mobile calls to action that Sears thought were important to them, and in many cases we also enable through search and display advertising, just as a side, you suddenly see how the value is actually much more broad. And as we move across this example, you do start to think about the value created from things like calls and the conversions from calls. And you think about the value that comes from store locator. And here we say direction clicks, but it could be either in a direction clicks from a map or a proximity solution in ad format or on the landing page, whatever it is, we're actually driving value based on people going into that store after engaging with the ads. Then we have classic e-commerce orders, which we've already covered. Then we have the app downloads that were so important to Sears that I actually put it very prominently on their M site. And with all of this in mind, what you begin to see is that each of these has its own unique conversion path, its own unique value and optimization strategies. So collectively, you see the conversions are higher than what was modeled in the e-commerce case. And in many cases, the e-commerce experience is actually not what's the center of what marketers are trying to accomplish on the site. And it can dramatically change the ROI equation. And that's obviously central how you bid in the AdWords auction. And so that's really what we want to talk to you about today. So I want to give an example of a customer who's done a really good job of this. And some of you might have seen this case study before. But it's iProspect, the agency working with Adidas. And again, here I'm showing the Adidas mobile site for reference. And from this, we can see quite clearly that there are two primary calls to action. Firstly, e-commerce, where you can really go down any number of paths to buy any sort of Adidas merchandise. But there's also really prominently listed the ability to find a retailer or a physical store, which is such an important mobile activity. So working in partnership with iProspect and Adidas, we began to build a very simple model. And you can see from the video I'll show in a minute, some areas are not 100% precise to start. For example, estimates were used to understand the number of people who used the store locator who ultimately found their way into store. But from that assumption, you really can model that of the people who found their way into store, how many people actually made a purchase and what their average purchase value was. So now you've built an entirely new attribution path where you can understand this new path into the store. We can see the people who physically end up in the store after visiting the Adidas mobile site are actually generating material value. In this case, we estimated it was $3.20 for every click on the store locator button on the site. And again, it's important to note that this model will be different for everyone. It's not going to be a click on a store locator for every business type. But for everyone, we do think it's important to understand how mobile consumers are engaging with your brand and your value proposition and what paths you're encouraging them to take and what the value this is creating for you. And I think the important thing to note about the example is they may be wrong in some of these assumptions, but as they test them and bring more data to the table, as they start to do things like A/B tests about how many people end up in store, as they understand the conversion rate of people who use store locator relative to organic traffic, they can refine this model and make it more accurate. So overall, I think what Adidas has done is really powerful because now they've got a way of thinking about the value of the traffic they're driving in store, which may change the path they offer the consumer on the site, as well as how they think about the store experience itself. So now let's take a quick look at the video case study that goes into a bit more detail around the results and the methodology of the process. Sorry, the video doesn't seem to be working. I would definitely encourage you to go onto our site, which is actually housed on as well. So I'll give you the URL later, but it's fvm.withgoogle.com, and you can check out the Adidas video case study, which I think really shows in a powerful way the way a company has used and harnessed this data. So let's go back to why we think as Google it's important for you and your business. And I think this is where we really begin to talk about the cost of inaction. You take the example of Adidas and you compare that to someone who may not have done that particular model. Adidas can actually now rethink how its mobile website does or does not want to drive people into store. And they can think about designing their mobile advertising formats to motivate this behaviour. They can understand how much value it drives, and finally they can think about those other calls to action that you need to prepare for as a marketer in mobile. So really the difference between the people who are doing this and who are doing this modelling and hard work and those who aren't is actually tailoring an experience on a mobile from insights on consumer behaviour and advertising ROI. So we think there's a material cost of inaction if your competitors are taking advantage of click-to-call or store locator or thinking about traffic that moves between devices in a way that you are not. And here at Google, we really want to help all our advertisers on that journey. And in a minute, I'll take you through an amazing new tool which help develop to help you go through that process. So before I dive into the tool, let's just recap some of our key takeaways and why we think these things are important. First, you really have to think about the consumer. They're moving in new dimensions and have new paths to purchase, and you really have to build for these and understand them. Secondly, think about how these new paths to purchase are or are not conversion paths for your business. Are people effectively moving through this channel? And if not, why not? And are there new ways in which you need to engage with this consumer on mobile devices? And last, to pull all of these together, we encourage you to work to understand how much each of these new paths is worth, to hopefully justify the experience, enable optimization, and to govern and drive where you make future investments. This certainly will impact how you market, and we think it will have broader implications about how you drive to stores, how you prepare call centres, what digital assets you build, and how you help people move back and forth between these experiences. So hopefully this was a short way of thinking about how people move in mobile in new ways and how this impacts your business. So next, let's deep dive a bit further into a new tool we've developed at Google to help you on that journey of assigning value to all of your mobile conversions. So our tool is called the Full Value of Mobile Calculator, which is designed to help you measure and implement all of the things I've spoken about so far today. It's an online tool that we can access through fvm.withgoogle.com, and the URL will be displayed again at the end of the webinar if you didn't catch it now. So let me take the next 5 minutes to run through the tool and you can see how simple it really is. This is the landing page of the tool where each of the key mobile conversion paths is represented by an icon around the circle and also at the top of the page. So you see calls, in-store, M-site, app downloads and cross-device conversion tracking all represented there. So to play around with the landing page a bit, for example, if you click on the blue call icon, the screen will change to give you the information on the importance of calls, the option to watch a short video that explains this further, or click through directly to the calculator. Feel free to play around and explore each of these options depending on their level of relevancy to your business. If you click on the option Go to the Calculator that you can see in the middle of the screen, you'll then begin the process of entering your own data that will result in a customized mobile ROI equation. Once you click through to the calculator, you'll be prompted with this screen, giving you 2 options. Firstly, you can manually enter the data using estimates from your AdWords account or your own internal data. Or secondly, you can download a quick type report from AdWords just to give you a quick head start. This option actually pre-populates the tool with the data available in your AdWords account. So if you choose the AdWords option, you'll be given some brief instructions, like it's on the screen now, on how to download the report in your account. So it's a ClickType report, and then you'll be prompted to upload it directly into the tool. You'll then be directed to the first of our new mobile conversion paths and prompted to fill out the remaining data points or estimates. In this case, let's run through the conversion path from mobile to store. The first data point you need is the volume of clicks from the Get Directions option on your mobile search campaigns between a certain date range. And you have the option to select the date range you wish to evaluate, so don't worry. If you've uploaded your AdWords data as we did in the step prior, this will actually be pre-populated from your account. The next data point the tool asks for is actually the percentage of users who clicked on this Get Directions option who actually ended up in your store. As acknowledged earlier, this is actually quite a difficult metric to evaluate, and some companies may not know the answer. So what we can do in this instance is actually click on the Need Help prompt that you can see that sits under the percentage that you'll enter into the tool. In each of these mobile conversion paths, we've included lots of information to help you estimate or use benchmarks when you don't have internal data. So in this case, we've used some Google research which provides industry benchmarks on this metric that you can use as a guide. In other cases, we'll suggest strategies you can employ internally to obtain this data, or our own observations or benchmarks from our client campaigns. So next we asked you to estimate what percentage of visitors that actually go into store actually end up making a purchase in your store. And many of you will actually have this kind of internal data on hand. But if you don't, again, feel free to click on the Need Help icon. Here we cite some of the data obtained from the work we did with Adidas and iProspect to give you some sort of starting point. You remember from the Adidas case study that they were also comfortable using estimates, and they were comfortable being conservative with those estimates. So feel free to take the leap, make a guess until you have the tools or capabilities to obtain that data. The final metric for the in-store So the final metric for the in-store path is actually the average value of an in-store customer's purchase, which we've valued here at around $80. You then need to proceed through all the other paths and enter in the data where necessary. It's important to note that it's actually not mandatory to fill out all of the fields. So if in-store, for example, isn't relevant to your business or you don't have an app, you can definitely leave these sections blank. Finally, there are some additional resources you can lean on within the tool to help guide you through the process. Firstly, a series of videos related to how each of these actions is actually central to consumers' lives today, and it's opened up possibilities that were actually previously unthought of. These are really great tools to use internally to bring the mobile message back to those teams in your business who might not be as familiar with these concepts. Next, we have some case studies which show real advertisers who have embraced this concept and tried to understand the full value of what mobile advertising was actually delivering to their business. Here you can see the Adidas video case study, which again, I would really encourage you to watch in your own time. We also have a case study from Radio Shack, and we're actually internally working on many more, so please come back to the site and check, as a new one might have been uploaded that's relevant to your business or your industry. Finally, we offer some tips for measuring those metrics we're asking you to use in the tool through things like Google Analytics, AdWords, and your own in-house data. So once you've entered your data and clicked View Summary, you'll be taken to a page like this that shows you on the right-hand side the value you'd previously attributed to mobile, which was really from m-commerce alone. Then the graph on the left incorporates all the new conversion paths and uses all the information you've chosen to produce a revised revenue number that more holistically evaluates what the advertising platform has delivered for you. It's important to note from this screen that you can actually still choose to edit any of the metrics you've entered to tweak the equation, which is what I've got up on the screen now. So what we have so far is actually an evaluation of what your mobile advertising has delivered for you. The next and final step is incorporating what your M site has also driven. To keep the results consistent, make sure you use data from the same date range that you've already been working with. The things you'll need for this section will include things like volume of calls, direction clicks, app downloads from your end site, all things that really should be available through your Google Analytics data. This brings you to your final summary that will give you a more encompassing view of what your mobile platform and your advertising is delivering to your business. Remember that originally we'd valued the platform at just under $25K looking at m-commerce alone. So including all of those new paths we've now discussed actually show that mobile is delivering over $200,000 value back to your business. So that leads us into the conclusion of today's webinar. We covered a lot of ground and we introduced some new ideas, so let's take a minute to recap on some of the key points. So one of the key objections we hear about mobile is that it doesn't convert. I hope you'll agree that after listening today, mobile doesn't actually have a conversion problem. Quite the opposite. We see millions of people every day converting on mobile devices. I think the more accurate way to frame this problem is actually to understand the measurement of these conversions. And you can do this internally by beginning the conversation about attributing value beyond m-commerce orders on your M site and identifying ways in which your mobile consumer could convert within your business. As mobile conversions are new to many businesses, we may not be measuring them or have the data at hand to complete this full value of mobile equation with 100% accuracy. However, I think here it's important to note two things. Firstly, we've designed the full value of mobile calculator to help you identify the data you need to get to measure to start this journey. Secondly, the process doesn't have to be perfect to start with. It's important to be able to rely on estimates and benchmarks. And really the final thing is about moving beyond these estimates and into hard data as new measurement capabilities become available. So it's important to constantly evaluate and refine your model based on the data available to you. So before we jump into our Q&A and finish today's webinar, I just briefly wanted to introduce a new resource that we'll be launching with Google in the coming week to really help you understand this connected mobile universe. And at Google, we do spend a lot of time and effort trying to understand this world we live in, especially in relation to how consumers use technology in everyday life. And we try and use this information to help our advertisers capitalize on these trends. So this website we're launching is called the Multi-Screen World, and it brings together all of our Australian research around how consumers are engaging and using screens in their everyday life. It's a fun and interactive site that's best viewed on a tablet as it has pinch and zoom and swipe functionality, but it's also great to use on desktop and smartphones. So please check it out next week when it launches. So thanks so much for sticking with us so far. I hope you found it helpful and I hope you'll find the full value of mobile calculator useful. Before we move to Q&A, I just want to encourage you to fill out the short survey at the end to help us improve our webinars in the future and make sure we're delivering value to our advertisers. So I've got Linda here, who works with me on the new products team, who's had a look at your questions in your console and I think has curated a few of them.
Thanks everyone for joining us in your engagement today and some of the great questions that have come through. I just got a few, and I'll start with one that we often hear a lot with advertisers is it's really hard to track mobile activity to help us make the budgeting decisions we need to make. So how would we suggest that you do this?
Thanks. That's a really great question, guys. And I think we've touched on it during the webinar, but I think, you can't talk about this too many times. I think it's really important to start making assumptions, and we do see this in the Adidas case. They have made high-level assumptions, and they've set them conservatively initially. And they started looking something simple like click-to-call, and we have also externally shareable case studies and examples around this with advertisers like Pizza Hut and Comcast who have used this kind of click-to-call functionality that show how they've used conversion data from calls to optimize and inform their strategy. So I'd really encourage you to look at the case studies we have up and use that data to inform your own strategy locally. Some great resources for that is the Think Insights site that we host at Google, which amalgamates a lot of our case studies and researches and pieces of research. So definitely check that out. I think it's just important to start that process of testing and learning. And another point I would make on that is that I think we're all reasonably comfortable with the attribution models we have in TV or print, for example, but actually we've got more data from the mobile platform and we know a consumer has taken an action. So I think we've got more data at hand to try and attribute value than perhaps some of the more traditional media we're comfortable with today.
Okay, great. We have another question that we know that desktop faces similar attribution challenges with consumers purchasing in store and having research on their desktop. So why aren't we looking to this, and how is mobile fundamentally different?
Yeah, so I definitely see we are focusing a lot on mobile, and desktop does face similar attribution challenges. We've done a lot of work at Google to understand the attribution challenges of desktop, and I think we've come really far. But I think where the mobile actually makes it even more complicated is the desktop device doesn't actually walk into the store with you, to the theatre or to the restaurant. And the desktop environment is actually very focused on e-commerce and can actually deliver a pretty valuable e-commerce experience. But mobile, some of the most valuable things you can do in a mobile is actually interacting in the physical world. So something like calling a retailer or finding a store. So I think it's those elements in which mobile collides with the physical world that actually make this a more difficult attribution challenge and why we're focusing on it so much at Google.
And I think we have maybe one more to end on. So cross-device conversions sound really exciting. We couldn't agree more. And one of the biggest ways we can attribute the value mobile advertising has to the path to purchase. So when is this coming to Australia, and what's it going to look like?
Great question. Yeah, I touched on cross-device conversion briefly during the webinar, and this is something we're so excited about at Google, and it's something that we've been wanting to do for a long time. Our engineers are working really, really hard behind the scenes to get this ready and make sure it's really useful and presented in the best way for us and our advertisers. We really think it'll close one of the biggest gaps we have currently in the knowledge of mobile conversions. We know mobile plays a huge role in the decision-making process, but it's often not the final place of purchase. So this kind of information will really, really help us bridge the gap. Unfortunately, there's no firm launch date yet, but what I want to do is urge people to be ready for this feature is to make sure you have conversion tracking enabled on both your desktop and your mobile device. If you don't, you won't be able to take advantage of the amazing data that this will provide. So we'll definitely have an update on the launch of this feature soon. But in the meantime, please make sure you have conversion tracking enabled. So is that the last question, Linda?
That is.
Amazing. Such great questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I've really enjoyed presenting this to you today. If we have any more questions, we can collect them after and we'll try and get back to you. And please, again, try and fill out the survey so we can improve the webinar for next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.